Yeah. Here we do see some of the things that make New England so nice in the fall. If we did a spring walk, we'd see a lot of New England woodland flowers, which New England is known for. But since we're in the fall, what we'll see is some asters. In the world, there's, I don't know, 20,000 aster species or something, but we've got a lot of fall flowering plants. This is one kind of aster. Behind the purple, lovely flowers are asters. But when you first see them, they are very unprepossessing looking until about September. And so it's very easy to pull them before they look so lovely. The purple ones in particular are ones that people do landscape with, but you have to wait a long time before you think, oh, that plant really looks good. So.
Do the butterflies like them?
Oh yeah, absolutely. And I don't know if you follow issues with pollinators, but the collapse of beehives have put an emphasis on native pollinators. And so pollinators obviously need something out there at all times of the year. And these are one of the things that they used to be just ubiquitous. Now they're very much more limited, but they're huge for pollinators at this time of year because they need that source. Yeah. This right here is jewelweed. Many of you might be familiar with it as the touch-me-not. Yeah, and if I can't do it on demand, but some of you will be able to find a dry one, little seed pod. Oh, there went one. And they will spring open if you touch them. So if you were to walk through a whole thing, it would be pop, 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 pop. And that's a native plant. And this is one that's not in any danger at all. They grow everywhere. Some of you think, oh, that's a weed, but it's a very fun weed. Donna walks in the woods all the time. She sits here.
Spends my lunch out
at
the pond.
I know.
How much farther are we walking?
Not very.
Not very far.
Because I want to be able to go along Coy. So I want you to say.
I could say a little bit more about the jewelweed because it is a plant whose sap is a good antidote for poison ivy or mosquito bites. And it often, there's no poison ivy right here that I know of, but it often grows right beside. The jewelweed and poison ivy are together, so it's almost like you get poison ivy or you touch it, you can put this sap on right away.
It's like a bright orange sap, right? Or am I wrong about that?
It's kind of clear, but it's a very succulent plant.
Right,
so you just can kind of break it down and squeeze it. It's kind of a gel-like consistency. So I know that about jewelweed.
What's your favorite part of the woods?
Oh boy, wherever I am right then.
Okay, that's fair.
Yeah, I enjoy.
But you have a lot of things you love. She's always telling me about.
Yeah,
I found these tadpoles. I found
there's some a wild orchid that's not uncommon, but it blooms around this time of year. So I really enjoy seeing that. I enjoy the changes. When you walk here, almost every day, you get to notice the changes and enjoy anticipating seeing things in the spring that you've seen before. So, but this is a great walk. Thank you.
We're gonna, I think, well, I'll tell you about Gull very briefly. If we were to continue, we would see Gull Pond, and unfortunately, many of you know Gull Pond, but we don't have a great deal of time. So I'll just tell you one quick story. Gull Pond was dug as a borrow pit for 128, and so it's a sand deposit. So sometimes I'll twit my freshmen and I'll say, do you think Gordon ships in all this sand? There's a little beach. Oh yeah, I was like, we do that with your tuition money. You ship in sand for a beach. I don't think so. Oh my gosh. Anyway, we then have a good laugh. But then I explained that in New England, when the glaciers retreated, they left deposits of sand and gravel and then big rocky boulders. And right there is a deposit of sand. And they used it for the building of 128. And of course, the water table is very high, and so they had to pump out water very, very fast. And they were down in there digging. And one day, the pumps hit the limit of what they could pump, and they couldn't pump as fast as the water was pouring in. And there were a couple of men and two pieces of it, like a truck and a big piece of equipment. And they got the two men and the truck out, but There is a big piece of earth-moving equipment in the bottom of Gull that has remained since. People that dive, will see that down there. And the Gull is steeper and has a sandy bottom, and so it doesn't have as much vegetation as you would see in Koi. We'll walk back this way, and we'll walk along Koi, and you'll be able to see a lot of what she said about some of the vines, and then we'll go up to the native plant garden by the AJ Chapel. Actually, this is pretty interesting because whenever you do any kind of construction, you have to have a permit from the DEP, and you have to prevent erosion, especially if you have a lot of wetlands, and we have wetlands everywhere. So this is their erosion control. I didn't say this over at the wetland restoration, but that restoration has been plagued by agricultural weeds, thistles and burdock, and just utterly plagued. And the reason I believe is because they all came out of the straw used when they were preventing erosion, which was lovely. Yeah. They seeded the new restoration with Canadian thistle and ragweed. I mean, all these things. Now, of course, these things have small seeds. It's very possible that they would have gotten there anyway, but the high level of thistles makes me suspect that it really did come out of the. So I have mixed feelings. People are trying hard. You try to solve one problem, But these are very beautiful, and some of you might have seen several different goldenrods. New England is just known. The meadows are known for goldenrod, and there's many species of goldenrod, and you see they come out in the fall. But this is what Donna was saying. There's some poison ivy mixed in, and many of these things like edges, and so the value of having, most of our development at one place, we're seeing the places where it's not working really well, but we, about 2 years ago, convened a group of conservation experts, and basically we're told the woods are very healthy, that and I've had several groups of students do mapping. Andy and Megan did mapping of invasive species, and they map very closely to the edges of the populated areas. So right here is a mixture of native and some very aggressive non-native species, but if the woods in general are not as difficult as some of these areas. But I'll just tell you about this space. In 2004, I asked Physical Plant, I worked with some students, and I asked Physical Plant, is there an area on the campus that's hard to landscape that you'd give us for a native plant garden? And they said this would be nice. So we wrote 2 grants that didn't get funded, and we did a lot of planning. And then in 2005, I got a little pocket of money. We put in just plants over here. And then in 2006, I got a little pocket of money, and we put in some irrigation. You can see some drip irrigation tubes. And so I've used volunteers, and we've done planting, and we got the irrigation in. And this year, Andy's brother was on the orientation staff, and they do a volunteer project, so we had them out, and we put in a huge amount of effort weeding, had a big pile of weeds. It didn't look quite as clear as this because there wasn't as much mulch, and this area was only sort of planted, but it looked similar to this, and there were white tags by all the plants. And then between orientation and the first day of school, some very zealous student worker came out with a weed whacker and weed whacked. And I found it out 10 minutes before. I actually had a photographer who wanted to see it, and I was bringing him on a tour to brag. And I was standing right over there, and I looked out and I said, well, where's the plant? Where are any of the plants? And I just started to cry. Oh my gosh. So I'm just who I am. I very rarely wear any makeup, and that day I had worn mascara, so of course I don't know how to deal with that, and there's mascara everywhere, and I'm like, my plant! plants, blah, you know. So I go into it. I sit next to Bruce Herman, the art professor many of you know, and he says, it's okay, these things work out, and he tells me how he went on sabbatical and somebody turned his art gallery into a deli while he was on sabbatical, and you know, but it worked out in the end. And I'm like, okay. Actually, that story helped me tremendously because I was able to but for about 2 weeks, I just couldn't even talk about it. And so then we got the students in my class to come out. We planted some more plants. And then I tried so hard. Like my goal was to have no mulch. So like this week, Donna came out with some other people. We did some more weeding. And I was out like mulching yesterday, but I couldn't get it all done. But you can see it's a work in progress. The things that have been interesting to me in doing this, our goal is to have native plants in here, many of which are from the New England Wildflower Society, some of which are sort of native plants, but they're cultivars for gardens. Because I haven't really been comfortable with picking things in the wild because I haven't necessarily known how well they would transplant and haven't wanted to waste them. But eventually what we would like would be for it to look more native than it does right now. Like your goal would be it would get lush enough that you didn't have to put mulch. This is sort of what we found with the irrigation was we had the lushest weeds you have ever seen. And then when the weed whacker came through, what that actually did was give the advantage to anything that grows from a rosette and sends up one spike. So that meant dandelions, orange hawkweed, lawn plantain, every single weed like that had an advantage. All of the plants I wanted were at a disadvantage. So it was like weed heaven. And so to keep that down, we've had to mulch. And the other thing that I've really learned is, you know, I wanted it to look like a more native space, but to protect it, I've had to make it look more and more formal. Like it's, and that's been, like, even after that incident, and I came out and we planted new plants and we had these spikes, we had them by all the plants. Even then, I had a colleague say, I took my class up, but we couldn't find the native plant garden. And I just thought, I don't know what you're looking for. Like, what are you looking for, folks? There were flowering plants. Yeah. So we don't have any funds right now, but I am aggressively cheerful about this, and we are going to get signage, and we're going to get something that says, even if you cannot tell, this is a native plant garden. Come and sit, and we're getting there. But right now, the flags are supposed to indicate this is a real intentional space, don't weed whack, because obviously what was obvious to me was not obvious to everybody else. So, and what's really fun, at some point we hope to have a lot of native plants that we didn't have to plant. There's wild columbine, there's a lot of New England asters, and you can see where the guy wasn't able to weed whack by where the asters are blooming. So, yeah. So it's been a real learning experience. I think we're more cheerful about it than we were a few weeks ago. And I hope by next year it just looks fabulous. This is going to be the end of our tour, and thank you. If you have any more questions, feel free to ask.